Hey guys, how you doing? And welcome to session 3 of our Holy Week conference here at Presence Ministries. I'm so excited that you decided to join us today, and if you do want to be notified of when we go live, make sure you hit that bell button down next to the subscribe button. And if you want to subscribe, feel free to do that too. But today we have an amazing session lined up for you with a panel with some stunning women of God. We have from our very own OCC Straven, we have Grace Brunton. We have one of our lead pastors, Pastor Jeanette Gillis. From Living Waters in Bells Hill, we have Louise Gardner. And we also have Susan Clark from Presence Ministries Scotland. Now, Susan and her late husband, Hugh, actually started Presence Ministries, and we thank you, Susan. We thank you for the legacy that you and Hugh have already built, and we thank you that you are now allowing us to be a part of that legacy, just to be asked to do the minimal of what we can do in this is so honoring, and we thank you for all you've done. We honor you guys, and I just can't wait to see where this ministry goes from here. So without further ado, we're going to move into a time of worship just now. So yeah, let's get pressed in and let's get ready for another session.
Hi, welcome to this session of Presence Ministries Scotland Easter Conference. And we just thought that as part of Conference Week, it would be good to mix it up a little bit. And we're going to have a couple of sessions that are panel discussion sessions. So this is the first of them. And I'd like to welcome Grace, Susan, Jeanette and Louise. They're all in church leadership positions. And so the idea is really just to pluck a couple of subjects out of the week of what people are speaking about, some of the other speakers, and just kind of open it up for a discussion and see if we can pull some points out of that might be helpful for coming out of this period of lockdown, as we hope Nicola's going to release us in Scotland by the end of March, and we can start to look forward to some more degree of normality. So one of the things that was talked about this week was discipling, how we disciple people. And I wanted to just sort of put it out there and say, we've been, by and large, the church has been locked down for almost a year now. And so how have we discipled? Because normally discipling tends to circle around precept discipleship programs, and it's on a Tuesday night at 7:30, good Christian time, or it's on a Saturday morning, but it's a kind of precept 5-week, 6-week, 10-week program. How do you think that has fared during COVID when we haven't had the ability to actually come together face to face? Anybody want to kick it off?
I think it's probably been really a wee bit hard for new Christians. I think for people who have, just before maybe COVID or even during that whole virus thing, when they don't have the contact, physically being able to come along and sit in church. I know a couple of people in that position, and I think that, when you think back to your own, when you become a Christian yourself and needing that support. So we've had to do things differently because of that. I think physically missing church must have been really hard for some folk.
Yeah, I suppose, thinking about it from that point of view, a lot of people have built up relationships with people through their church family, their church connections. So if you were just new in the door and didn't have that relationship, for these kind of people, it would have been a difficult way to connect with others. I suppose I hadn't really thought about it from that point of view of the benefit of being in church for such a long time and the relationships that you already have. Yeah.
Sure, and I think for people that maybe if their families are, Christians that know the Lord and they can have that support. But I know for us in our church life, a lot of people that we see come to the Lord have no actual connection with other Christians. So I think that might be a tough one for them. I know it's a tough one for them.
We as a church fellowship, when we went into lockdown, for us, I know a lot of people would pre-record and then they would just put it out on a Sunday morning. For us, we made the decision to go through the Zoom channel. So for us, every Sunday morning as a church fellowship, we would meet, it was a deliberate choice that we made, because we felt, for that reason as well, you were able to connect with them that way. And from a pastoral point of view, that as well was good, because you were checking on who was in. So that worked well for us. But I know for a lot of churches, everybody did a different way of doing it.
I think as well, we've had to rethink about what discipleship actually looks like. It's not just about being able to meet together on a one-to-one, on a group basis, at a set time every week. You've got to redefine almost what that looks like and what discipleship looks like, because for some people, maybe we rest too much on an agreed programme, and we rely too much on turning up on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock and go, right, there we go, I've ticked that box. 7:30, whatever, whatever typical Christian time we choose, and you rely on turning up to a meeting and saying, right, there you go, I've done my discipleship for the week, thanks very much. And I think this whole period has actually challenged us to have to think outside the box with that. For myself, I'm not particularly a people person, I'm a numbers person. And I'm an introvert, so that going out and meeting people and making sure that I continue relationships is challenging. You know, that is one of the big challenges, because discipleship is actually not just about turning up to a meeting and making sure that I talk to people. Discipleship for me is actually much more about getting alongside people and making sure that you're spotting the ones that are on the sidelines and getting alongside. And so it's been a real challenge for me to think, what does that look like now when you take the restrictions, if you like, of an hour and a half once a week as part of a programme? I've got to think outside the box now and think, no, I've got to do this differently. Yeah. You know, I've got to get alongside people. I've got to be much more intentional, because it's got to be relational. You know, it's got to be about making connections with certain people and making sure that I'm keeping up those relationships on a regular basis. And so it's harder. Without a doubt, it's harder, because it's much more outside the box.
Because you can't, or you're not supposed to physically meet someone for a coffee. Because that's one of my favourite things in discipleship. Meet someone for a coffee, and then you can have a real relaxed chat. Because for me personally, I always feel that works better. You know, I'm not talking about an actual programme at this time. I'm thinking, you know, like just catching up with someone to see how they're really, really doing, rather than sitting down with a discipleship book with them and taking them through a course. And I've found that a huge miss, a really huge miss. And I've had to, there's one lady I'm in a bubble with, but apart from that, it's all been phone calls. And sometimes Zooms, you know, and that's even in a one-to-one with a Zoom. It's not too bad, but it's not as good as physically sitting there with coffee. Any excuse to have a coffee.
Absolutely. I know. It's part of who we are, isn't it? It's the big thing is that one-to-one, and as much as Zoom has been a lifesaver for so many, it's still just not the same as being, you know, person to person.
I think the challenge is going to be when we go back to normality or back to church life, is trying to connect with people again, because it's quite difficult for people when they've been disconnected, and it's been so traumatic for people, more so than what we realise, that people have been left in isolation and not being able to see someone, especially if you live on your own, has been quite difficult. So I think one of the challenges that we're going to have to look at is to reconnect with people at a level and start to build bridges again.
And we'll come on to that. I wanted to try and kind of get an idea of now that we've not been able to, you touched on it, now we've not been able to do preset programs. When we have a new convert or somebody that said yes to Jesus, or somebody that's become a new Christian, depending on your terminology you're familiar with, normally the first thing we do is lock them into church life. Normally the first thing we do is we befriend them, and we surround them with opportunities of what the church is doing, and specifically we look for ways to formally and informally disciple them. But by and large, we've been robbed of all that over this last year, because, as you say, we can't just rock up and have a group or meet in a local cafe and have a coffee and chew the fat. We've got to really think about, well, how do we disciple people? And so we'll come on to some of the things later on about that. But I was one of the things you touched on was new Christians, because for me, I can understand that people that are established in the faith and have been going to church and have got established relationships in and through church, discipleship for them is slightly different. But when you've got a brand new Christian, somebody that's just said yes to Jesus and just started to believe and have faith, they don't have the same advantages we had, or even new Christians had 18 months ago. So how do we effectively start to disciple these people from day one? Without, once we've done the rah, fantastic, it's great you said yes to Jesus, but then what? How do you think is an effective way right now, before we're even out of lockdown, how do we keep connected to these people?
I think everything's changed in the last year. I think discipleship, as you said, we would bring people to events, we would bring people into whatever was happening. We haven't had that. So the challenge has been for us as individuals to connect one-to-one with people in whatever way we can do that. How have we shared in the last year Jesus with our neighbours? How have we shared Jesus with the people that we meet in the supermarket, or opportunities that we've had within the limited restrictions that we've had?
Yeah.
So there has been a real, almost like a shift of responsibility from people on a platform being responsible for discipleship of groups of people to individuals having to take responsibility for discipleship.
Yeah.
And that's been a challenge, I think, for a lot of people.
It's one of the things we're going to talk to some guys later on in the week in the panel about evangelism, because evangelism is another huge section of church life that's had to think differently as well. So there's a real crossover between how we adapt to evangelism and how we adapt to discipleship. And with new Christians, it's like, where do we go?
The only, I can talk just from a little experience on a couple of people, and really it's been encouraging people to join, to make sure they listen to the service online. Now, some people say, oh goodness, but it's definitely, I know, like for our pastor, he's so practical about a lot of things. I know one person in particular has had a lot of help just listening to the service. It's, a brand new convert. And then the other side of it is trying to get them to come on to, we do a Zoom through the week as well, trying to get them to connect on that. And sometimes they come in and sometimes they don't. And it's trying not to be too threatening what happened to you, because that's what you really want. I was chatting to Susan yesterday about this, because you kind of know they need the connection, but because they don't necessarily know what they need, and it's trying to be so wise and to be helpful and not crush a person because they can't make it onto a call, or they can't make it to the Zoom discussion or whatever. Trying to just do your best for them, and the best you can always do is pray for them. That's definitely true. But one of the things I've found over this last several months about discipleship is I've been quite surprised about how many people have been long-term Christians who have actually found it really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And that has been something that the Lord really showed me, and really brought revelation at one point to me about it, and I was stunned, but I found, as the Lord helped me to see it, how important it was to people who have been Christians maybe for as long as 20 years, but because, like Susan mentioned, they're feeling so isolated, and if you don't see anyone at all, and you're maybe even a bit older and you've had to stay indoors, that's been so tough for people, to the point where it's affected their faith. Really.
And I think as well, the church for a long time has created, in my opinion, wrongly, this sense that everything flows from the platform, everything flows through leadership. And so people who have been established Christians, as you would say, for a long time, have actually, they're not good self-feeders.
No.
And they've struggled through this time because they haven't had that spiritual fellowship, that teaching, that input in the way they've had it for the last 20 years. And suddenly it's like, I don't know what I'm doing here. I've never been in this position
before. It's a huge
before.
miss for them.
Yeah, so there's an education process there for people that have been longer in the faith, not just new Christians, but people that are established.
I think at the beginning, this time probably last year, when everything really kind of kicked off, and there was a lot of fear and a lot of stuff going on. I think I personally feel that at that point, people were really quick off the mark to text or message or whatever forum to message a friend and just say check in on them. And I think I would encourage so many people to keep doing that. I think that's a huge thing, is to know that somebody's thinking about you and caring about you, especially if you're on your own. I think to know that, and that's down to an individual again. That again, it takes it back from leadership's responsibility to individuals as Christians to love one another, to look out for one another, to encourage people that we're all part of this bigger family together, and that love that we've got, has to be extended out, and that we have to share that with each other. And that's been an encouragement to see people actually do that. I know personally for myself, when somebody sends me a message or whatever, it's a huge lift to know that somebody else is thinking about you. So very much, I think,
and that's a very basic form of discipleship.
Yeah,
it's just
something that we've forgotten about sometimes is what it's almost like back to the very basics and the simple things of the early church, and when they were together and and they would fellowship together, and they would find a way to be able to share, just to share Jesus with each other. And I think that's been a really positive thing that has come out of the last year.
I think it's been quite interesting to see, you mentioned about established Christians not being really good at feeding themselves, being used to going to church and getting the pastor to bring a word and that feeds them during the week. But I actually think it's actually been quite taking a positive out of the COVID experience, is that it's forced people to go and to ferret about in the Word of God for themselves, and to seek God for a word, to seek God for His protection, to pray, to interact with the Holy Spirit in ways that they've never done, probably in their lifetime. And I suppose it's been a bit of a preparation time for them as well, because they're able to look at other people, like we're talking about, maybe new Christians or people that are just coming to faith in Jesus. But they're being able to look at, because of what they've been searching for to feed themselves, they're now in a position to be able to feed other people. So again, there's ways of two, three different ways of looking at it. That it could be a training ground for a lot of established
You're right.
Christians.
The whole that excites me, because the whole COVID thing, there's good and evil in everything, and the enemy wants to use the COVID for his purposes, to shut the mouth of the church, to shut down the church, to shut the function of the church, to disconnect people, to bring division, to bring separation, isolation. But out of this, God surely wants to find ways to turn bad to good. And so you've mentioned that one of the things that's good. What else is good that's come out of COVID? What else do you think it's encouraged people to do when they haven't been able to function as they normally would in normal church? Because church isn't normal at the moment and may never be that normal again. So what are some of the positives you would take out of the journey we've been in the last 12 months?
Well, I was really encouraged because someone called me one day, this is several months ago, and said, I feel as though the Lord has asked me to specifically pray for new Christians. Imagine getting a call like that. How brilliant was that? And I thought, oh, that's the best. And she said to me, what do you think? And I said, I don't need to think about it. It's absolutely of God. It's the best thing. So she had made up a list of people to then start praying about it. And I thought, that is just fantastic, because that was something really positive that came out of it. Someone that I'm sure would never have thought to do that before. But you know that's a God thing, don't you?
That's encouraging, because that's showing growth in the midst of adversity.
And it's not maybe a growth measure we traditionally use, because it's not another bum in the church seat on a Sunday. It's a different kind of measurement tool that we have to employ to see where there's spiritual growth. It's not necessarily, because we always have this misnomer that growth is determined by attendance. But because we don't have that measuring tool at the moment, it's great to see that and to hear of people stepping out their comfort zone. And
I too think, if you think about the amount of people that are now tuning into church services, online church services, it's absolutely astounding. People that would never walk into a church, and they are tuning in regularly. You can tell by even the numbers when you check. It's absolutely fantastic. So it's just like everything else. It's like, Satan using things that he thinks will hold people back, and the very opposite has happened. That people are desperate to find a solution in God. And that's fantastic.
I think there's been lots of really encouraging things that's happened. I mean, for me personally, there's parts of it I have absolutely loved. I've loved some of the rest that we've been forced to have. I have loved being creative in ways that we would never have thought about being creative before. It's stretched a lot of churches because they've had to really think differently. They've had to think out the box. They've had to get involved with technology. But that's been a really encouraging thing to see. It's allowed the church to go out with the walls in ways that we've never gone out with the walls before. It's brought churches together in a way that some churches have never, because churches have been forced to draw on resources, and I've loved that. I've loved work, the work that we've done as churches together. We would never have done that if we hadn't come through what we've come through. So in so many ways, it's given, the church a real shake to say we have to think,
Yeah.
we have to think differently.
And a voice into places we didn't get a voice before.
Absolutely, yeah.
One of the things that makes me smile is that we have, up until we've had to deal with this situation, we very much had the attitude that digital technology, digital communication, that was for the young folk. And now we're in a situation where you've got 17, 18-year-olds sitting with an iPad, zooming into church meetings. I mean, that's phenomenal, because that would never have happened if we hadn't come this journey. And so it's not just introducing technology, it's using technology to cross the generations.
Yeah. Also, I think for smaller churches, because you would rely on the big churches, they would be the ones that would use technology, whereas the smaller churches, we've all been challenged as well to say, how can we find a way of connecting? How can we find a way of communicating? How can, what are we going to do? What's God going to use us for? So it'll be interesting as we move forward, how we actually use a lot of that God's,
because without realising it, that's
time.
the essence of discipleship, connecting and communicating.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter what means we use to do that. It's just finding a means that's effective, that works. Yeah. And one method might not work for one group, but it works for another group. And it's just being thoughtful and working things out in the situation we're in. Cool. One thing I want to just kind of round off with is, okay, so we've come on a journey. We've learned to a degree, no matter how uncomfortable it feels, to deal and live with isolation, separation. But there's a day coming when that'll end, surely. Surely, please. So when that ends, how do we then regroup the church to function as a corporate body, gathered physically? Because that's going to be another challenge. Because for some people, the separation has been so severe and so long that they're actually out of the habit now of coming together. So how do we effectively, in discipleship terms, how do we regroup the church and pull it back together without running the risk of leaving people out or isolating people by pulling together a group and not them? How do you think we can go ahead and
I think the worst thing that we could do is to go back to business as usual. Yeah. Because this has been such a dramatic change for all of us, and it's been exciting. Change can be disconcerting, but it can also be very exciting. Yeah. And I think that giving God back his church has been exciting, because there are so many other ways that God wants to express his kingdom through our lives. And it's not just in church on a Sunday.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's one of the things that has been completely blown out the water with COVID, is that we've all had to think outside the box and think of different ways of connecting with people. And I, for one, don't want to go back to as it was, because I think there's something new and something fresh about and exciting about this new phase, new season we're coming into. Yeah. And I hope that it never goes back to what it was before.
Yeah.
I think the church has become much more relational. We've had to become much more reliant on relationships with one another and building relationships with one another, that if it becomes back into a meeting thing, then you lose that, don't you? And a lot of what's happened in the past year is that you've had to rely on and build on relationships with individuals, and we want to learn those lessons that we've learned in the past year, not lose them. So I guess even now is a good time to look back and think, well, what do we want to keep? What do we want to learn from this period, and make sure that we take it forth into the next season, because the next season is going to look different. The next 12 months are going to look much different to the past 12 months and the past 24 months. So it's a good time to just take stock and think, well, I want to keep going with that, and I want to develop that. And like we talked about probably about 6 months ago, when things were starting to release, about how good actually Zoom was and what an effective tool it was to reach some people and to allow some people that stepping stone into church, that you know, that they maybe wouldn't walk through the front door, or maybe can't walk through the front door for whatever reason. But it's an opportunity still to reach people where they are at, and to have that connection and maintain that connection. Even people that we know at the other side of the world, you know, you still have a relationship with them, and you still want to remain connected with them. And so just looking at what good has come out of this, and say, right, well, how can we move forward, and what have we missed? You know, what are the real things that we've missed? The real valuable things that we enjoy doing, like what you said, Louise, about going out and having coffee with people, and just saying, right, I'm going to make sure that I work on these things going forward, and not take them for granted. Because I think sometimes we don't appreciate how much we took for granted before, with the freedoms that we had, and just being able to look back and think, these are the real precious times where discipleship really had a chance to happen. Because like what we said earlier as well, discipleship is not just about listening to the man from the front. You know, it's so important, but actually it's about all of us. Because being a disciple is being a pupil. Is learning, not just from the man at the front or the people who are speaking, but directly from the shepherd himself, directly from God, so that we can not just be a disciple of the Lord and listen to him, but actually be able to bring something to other people and disciple them. So if we are not teaching ourselves, if we're not learning ourselves, how can we help other people? So like for me, I need to think, right, you know, what good things have I learned in this period? What things can we use going forward? And what have I missed? What have I missed the most? And what am I going to put into practice? You know, and that's something we can do now.
I think it's almost like we've said, you know, we've said that we've seen people, you know, go on a new journey of discipleship as an individual. So one of the things that we really don't want to lose as we're coming through is that let's not depower them. Let's not just go back to the way it was, but to use this time that people and all that people have learned to encourage them and say, go out with what God's done in this last year. As an individual, God has got a purpose in bringing you through this year to go and do something incredible for him. So go and do it. And whereas the worry would be that we would just go back to the norm and they would just come back in, and then they would fall back into these old habits again. And we cannot allow ourselves as individuals to go back to these old habits, because God has a call and a purpose on each individual to go out with what we've learned in this season and say, what are we going to do for Jesus in the next season? What are we going to take? What has God done as, you know, with us as an individual, preparing us for this next part of it? And that would be, it would just be so sad that if we went back to the way it was and didn't allow
the comfortable place, Jeanette. We were too comfortable. And I think that whole thing about the extreme comfortable church almost is just, you know, against God's heart. And just so I think, if nothing else, if we've learned anything, stop being so comfortable and think out of the box.
And don't just sit back and let somebody else do all the heavy work and do all the heavy lifting, because it's too easy to just say, oh, that's the pastor's job, or that's the children's worker's job, or the youth worker's job. No, we actually all need to come together a lot more and support one another and take the ownership for what God has put in us, you know, our calling, our gifting, our abilities, and not downplay them almost, because I hope and pray that giftings and talents and abilities have been released and shown through this time, because other people have been forced to take a step back and are forced to, you know, maybe not be so much in the limelight, and it's allowed other people to grow and flourish and develop and step more into their calling. And it would be tragic if we stopped that from being so. As a church as a whole, we need to continue to celebrate those giftings and talents and to encourage that and make a way for them to continue on that path.
I love that expression, that we'll kind of round off this, but I love that expression that Susie used, you know, giving the church back to God. Because a lot of what church has become is really more man's agenda than God's agenda. It's what fits us and what we've made to fit, rather than what God wanted. And so this whole period of pandemic it's been a hiatus in some way, because it's given us a break to actually step back from what we've traditionally done week in, week out, month in, month out, year in, year out, decade in, decade out. And it's given us a real golden opportunity to say, well, do you know what? Let's how do we integrate some of the good stuff that we've always done, that still works, that still has God's touch on it, but how do we integrate that with the new stuff that we've learned in this season? How do we marry the two together, regroup the church, send it forward? And just sitting here this afternoon discussing with you, it's exciting to see church leaders and people that are in positions of driving the church forward out of this are passionate and excited and not downtrodden, not disappointed, not disillusioned, but you still get the passion to see incredible things happen for God. And the church will survive. The church has survived for 2,000 years, and it will survive, and it survives because of people like you, because you carry the passion that overrides the problem. And so often we get so... We focus on the problem, but you guys are acknowledging the problem as realists, but you're also overcoming the problem with new ideas and welcoming the challenge and pushing forward. And the thing that drives that is passion. And I love that, you know, when God's passion is released in the church, it impacts the world. It's no longer just a club. It's no longer just a subculture. It does what it's designed to do. It does what God wanted to say on the tin. It impacts people's lives, and it changes their futures, and it introduces them to the man who can change their eternity. So I'm excited, and it's been great chatting with you guys, because I think the whole purpose of this kind of discussion is to lift it from the man or the woman at the front delivering a message, which is great, but it also makes it real and live and evolving. There's no rehearsal here. These are just ideas that are coming from our experience across quite a broad section of church experience, and to be able to just sit here and enjoy the banter, but banter that's going to, over the next coming months and years, change people's eternity is really, really exciting. So the church is healthy. The church has not been shut up or shut down. The church has just been, it's been a sickle sharpening season, and we're ready to go, and the harvest is white, ready to be taken into the storehouse. And here's some people here that are ready to get into that field with their sickle. Amen. Awesome. Thanks, girls.
Thank you.
When it feels like the dark lingers longer than the night, when the shadows feel like giants, are you chasing me down? Tell me, where could I run from your light? Where could I hide? And within your precious thoughts, there's no hiding from your love. Highs and lows, Lord, you're with me either way it goes. Should I rise or should I fall? Even so, Lord, your mercy isn't even flow. You're too good to let me go. Should I dance on the heights or make my bed among the depths? Your mercy waits at every end. like you planned it from the start. Should the dawn come with wings, or find me far side of the sea, there your hand still fastens me, ever closer to your heart. Whoa, highs and lows, Lord, you're with me either way it goes. Should I rise or should I fall? Even so, Lord, your mercy isn't even flow. Should I rise or should I fall? You were faithful through it all. You're too good to let me go. Highs and lows, you surround me either way it goes. Should I rise or should I fall? Lord, you're with me through it all. Highs and lows, in the rhythms of your grace I know. Should I rise or should I fall? You were faithful through it all. You're too good to let me go. Ooh. Ooh.
Fantastic, guys. And I love that panel. I love when we take a concept and just change it a little bit. And I love these women who come and are encouraging and inspiring through the discussion of discipleship. Now, if you at home are a new Christian or you are someone who's never came across Christianity, feel free to get in touch with us here at Presence and we will get you hooked in to a local church. So, Lord, I just want to thank you, Lord. I want to thank you for these women. I want to thank you for the input that they pour into our lives. I want to thank you that although these guys on YouTube or wherever they're watching it only see a snippet, that the outpour that these women give, even that I've experienced, is amazing, Lord, and they deserve the best. They deserve every blessing that comes to you, Lord. And I just pray for any new disciples out there or any people who need a fire lit under the discipleship. I pray that this message on this panel really sits with them, Lord. I pray that you start a new journey, you ignite them to get on fire for you again, Lord. And we can see this world change through a close relationship and discipleship with you, Lord. Amen. Well, that is the end of our third session, guys. I hope you can join us for tomorrow. We have a conversation with Nicola Dean and Sloan Simpson, who are part of the team at Hillsong over in Brisbane. Sloan Simpson is the worship leader over there, and Nicola has been part of the Hillsong volunteering system for about 10 years now across different campuses. She's been in Brisbane, she's been in Sydney, and she's also been in New York. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Remember, if you want to keep notified of when these videos come straight away, just remember, hit the bell down below. But until tomorrow, have a good one.